Finally, if we were on campus, we would say swipe in with your ID. But since we are virtual, we're having you log into the kiosk by a posting that you will see shortly in the chat room. So for everyone who is online, that information was just posted up, and we'll just ask you to use that link so that you can sign in, and you see the access code is 1234. Okay, and we're going to get started in just a moment. Thank you for joining us.
Also, if we can ask everyone to mute their microphones, this webinar will be recorded. So if you don't possibly want your video to pop up while our presenter is speaking, go ahead and turn your cameras off too. Thank you.
All right, well, welcome everyone here. I'm very glad that you're here to join us. This is the fourth of 4 events that we've had in the Working While Black Career series. We did begin this series in response to wanting to be sure that we are serving the unique needs and interests of Black students on campus. And so we have had 3 other events, and we're going to be looking to do more next semester. Just wanted to get started by introducing our guest speaker today. His name is Charles Davidson. He is a Terp. That's the first thing I'm going to say. And the first thing, so there's one way for us to connect with him. He's currently the director of the Pre-Law Institute and Center for Postgraduate Opportunities at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. Some of you know it as CUNY. Dr. Davidson is an educator and senior administrator specializing in holistically supporting students of color in their academic and professional endeavors. He's deeply committed to improving educational and personal outcomes for these students. He's been a longtime advocate for institutional equity, educational and social reform. And he is also a frequent speaker on matters pertaining to professional opportunities and personal empowerment for Black students and other students of color. He's been an invited keynote speaker at Harvard, Georgetown, his law school alma mater, and also Oxford. And wanted to also let you all know that I have seen this gentleman speak, and this is why I thought that it would be a great idea to introduce him to you. He is inspiring, he is serious, he can help you think about ways to navigate some of the challenges that might have come up recently with the double pandemic and even before that, because you know a lot of the stuff isn't new as far as the social justice issues, especially for some for more than others. I would like to share additional background with you. He is, prior to coming to CUNY, he was the assistant professor of international law at the American University in Cairo, where he taught courses in public international law, US constitutional law, civil rights and liberties, and international criminal law. So those of you who have interest in there, you might have questions that that are specific. He's always willing to help folks, and I like to point that out while we have him here. He holds a BA in French from the University of Maryland, a JD from George Washington, and a master's in law and diplomacy, and a PhD in international relations from a Fletcher School at Tufts. He's also happened to study at the Université de Paris and Harvard University. That was my big, that was my tribute to Alex Trebek. Okay, so without further ado, and please go ahead, plan to take notes and listen to resources or tips and guidance as far as just how to navigate some of the waters that we find ourselves in today, especially as a student of color, and as someone who's getting ready to go and enter the workforce, and some things you might want to consider for what you can expect. Go ahead, Dr. Davidson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you to Ms. Woods and to Ms. Malloy, who I just met. I think one thing that we left out was that I have actually known Ms. Woods since I was probably 9, right? Or 10 or something like, even younger perhaps. So I've known her all of my life, really. And so that's one really important connection for me in being here tonight. But I think the other important connection for me is that I've lived all around the world. I've worked in 13 countries. I was a lawyer. I left that. I did other things. I became a professor, done lots of things for lots of students, and I've never been back to Maryland. I've never done anything with University of Maryland before. And that's really, I looked at it today and I thought about it, and it's a real glaring lack in what I've done, because I am very connected to University of Maryland. I mean, at least emotionally, I thought I was a person who had some really negative academic experiences growing up. I think all of my academic experiences were negative until I got to Maryland. I always tell my students, they're like, Dr. Davidson, you have all these degrees. And I always say yes. And I was the kid who was not going to college, right? And I did go, and I went to Maryland, and it changed my whole world, right? It was from Maryland. It's the base and the education that I got at Maryland that kept me in school for 4 more degrees, right? That I learned to love learning in a way that I had never learned before. So I really feel I'm very, very happy to be with you all tonight for that reason in particular. And I guess the other thing I'd say is that, before I begin, is that I love, and Ms. Woods alluded to this, and I just want to be explicit about it. I talk to lots of student groups, but there's no group more important to me than talking to Black students. Nothing makes me happier than this. I mean, I realize that I've done a lot of things, and I've had a lot of career experiences, and I'll talk to you about that in a bit, but I realize that nothing makes me happier than talking to Black students. I have always been someone who has been interested in supporting Black students and students of color. But I really, in the last few years, in the last 4 years, let's be clear, I have made it really the central point of my work. And I want to just underscore for you that it's so important, I think, for us. I mean, and I'm speaking as a Black person, I think, and I'm speaking personally as a Black educator, it's really crucial for me to let you all know at the outset who I am and where I come at this. And I come at this from the perspective of, I love Black people. I will always support Black people, and I will always support Black students. And I don't know any of you, but I will say this: if there's any way I can help you, and I'm telling you this at the beginning, I will help you. Ms. Woods has my email. You can contact me. I will respond to you, because I think so many of us go through our educational experiences, and either we don't hear that, or we hear it and it's not sincere. And so I just want to throw that out there, because I know that I went through all of my education without ever hearing that. And in some ways, I paid a price for that, which I can talk about a little bit later. I guess the last thing I'd say is, if you have questions, just give us the questions. I have a script that I never stick to, so you can just ask me whatever you'd like, and we can just jump in that way as well. One more observation before I begin, and thank you, Ms. Woods, for reading that bio, which I supplied to you. But as I hear that bio, I think it's a very a nice and standard bio. I think I followed all the conventions of the genre of bio writing, but I hear it and I realize that it's also really false, right? The problem with the bio, right, with that bio that I just heard, is that it obscures all of the failure I had, and all of the setbacks, and all of my insecurity, and all of my imposter syndrome, and all of my feeling that I've just never been successful enough, right? It obscures all that, and it looks really lovely. I have a longer one than that, right? It's really, really, very lovely. And he's been to all these countries, and he worked in all these things, and he speaks all of these languages. All of that is true. But the thing about that paper version of me is it doesn't tell the story of the person who began this journey as a young person, who walked around feeling like, I'm just not good enough, who had just experiences as a Black person in white schools, as a gay Black person in white schools, right? I came through the educational system, and I left with the feeling of like, something's wrong with me, or I'm just not good enough, or I have to do so much in order to prove myself. And I just want to just begin by saying, just by hearing my own bio, it reminds me that I'd like to just say to all of you, as you embark on your postgraduate, you start thinking about your postgraduate pathways, make sure that you are not just a paper version of you, right? Because the paper version of me is really is lovely, but that's actually not me. And I think I spent so much time trying to build that wonderful resume and do all the things that look great and do everything correctly. And I wasn't spending as much time actually thinking about who I really was, what success looked like to me, was what I was doing in integrity with who I am as a person, right? These are questions that I don't think anybody ever asked me to grapple with at the moments, at these sort of key moments when I should have been. It's a given that it seems to be a given in our society that, success is obvious. You make a lot of money, you get a title, you get a job, you become middle class, you do all of these things. That's sort of the received notion of what success is for us. And I found my life changed when I realized I don't want that. I want the money, obviously. I want the money, and I want obviously the money. That's not part of it. I definitely want that. But the point of it is that, I realized at some point in my career that I don't want what you want. And this actually doesn't fit me. And so I would just invite you to be as mindful about that resume that you're building, to be as mindful about this internal resume, right, that you're building. One of the things I often ask students to do is I often ask them, I say, do a resume for me. I'll never see it, but I do want you to write it out. But do a resume for me. And on that resume, start when you were 5, start from like 5 or 7, when you can remember, and write down the things you did in your life that you can never tell anybody else, but that you're deeply proud of. Write down all the things that you got through that nobody else knows that you got through. Write down the things that write down your secret victories. Write down the things that you did, and do that chronologically, just like a resume. Because the truth of the matter is, I want you to be adding to that resume as much as you're adding to the resume you're going to send to the employer. And, I'm always, when I hear that bio of myself, I think, wow, that's so fascinating. He sounds like a great and accomplished guy. Then I'm like, oh, it's me. And with all of these, with all of these other human issues that I have. But I think that the part about myself that I've really, really started to own was that, all that stuff, the degrees, the schools, the work, the travel, all that is great. But ultimately what has mattered most, and I say this to you all really seriously, what matters most are the things that you write on that CV about who you are, right? That secret CV, that spiritual CV, that personal CV. That's the one I think that you really need to be sure you add to, because the paper will get you someplace, definitely. I mean, my paper resume got me lots of places. The problem was I didn't know who I was when I got there. I believed that I was that paper version. It makes me think that when I was in law school, this is just how crazy the world was. When I was in law school, we had a black resume and a white resume, which is just amazing, right? We had a black resume and a white resume. The white resume was, and I could have that because my name is Charles Robert Davidson, not distinguishable. You couldn't tell who the person was, right? But I had a resume that was scrubbed, and we all did, resume that we scrubbed of anything that indicated that we were black. Fascinating, right? And then when we thought about places that might be more interested in hiring black lawyers, we put all our black stuff in there. We were the Black Law Students Club. I was in the Afro-American, Pan-African Club. All of that stuff was on the black resume. And it's fascinating to think, right? 30 years later, why would I have ever had a resume where I didn't want people to know that I was black? And why was that normal? Right? Because listen, I would get the interviews. I'd go into the law firm, and I would invariably get to the front desk, and the question would be, and this is the intonation, "You're Charles Davidson?" Which should have been a tip off to me. You can't work here. You can't work here, right? But the truth of the matter was the culture And I want you to think about this. The culture of our culture, our American culture, the culture of your institution, the cultures of your family, the cultures that we live in sometimes encourage us to do things that actually aren't in integrity with who we are. You know, I'm just thinking about, you know, being law students, we were looking for jobs in places that did not really want to hire Black people. I had a very good friend, we were interviewing for a big New York firm, and she was going into the interview, and her name was Lori. And but before Lori was interviewing, they were interviewing another classmate, a white woman. They were interviewing her first. Lori was out waiting, and I was behind Lori. And a fire drill went off during the middle of the interview that the interviewer was having with the white student. And the interviewer, the lawyer, comes out and asks Lori, who's sitting there in a suit and pearls and a silk blouse, "Where's the fire escape?" And she says, "I don't know, we're looking for it too." We have the fire drill, whatever happens, we all go back in. The student resumes her interview, and then she comes out and she says to Lori, "I just think you should know, he thinks you're a maid." And he was really upset that the maid didn't know where the fire escape was, where the fire escape was. This was the maid in the silk blouse with the pearls, with a portfolio, right? Be very careful that you don't believe that you're just that paper resume, because it will get you places. But that's not the issue. I'm sure you can go wherever you want to go. The question is that where you're meant to be? Is that where you're meant to be? That's the work, right? And that's why I invite you to please take it seriously, to really think, because this is what our culture doesn't want us to do. It doesn't want us to think about our inner successes, right? The things we can't show people, right? We're all invested in this sort of external image, right? And of course, it's important and it's crucial. And, you know, I'm talking in a career services, you know, panel. So I'm very clear that it's important to have good resumes, good things on the resume, to do it right and to do it well. But I also want you to know that's not you. I just had another resume story. When I was working in the Middle East, and I was called for a job in New York. So I came back for the job in New York, and I was told I was going to be interviewed at 3 o'clock. And so I come early. And so I'm standing there, and I've announced myself to the security guard, and he said, you know, well, somebody will come to get you. And, you know, 5 minutes went by, 10 minutes went by, 15 minutes went by. And I'm like, well, these people are not going to, you know, say that I'm late. So I went back to the security guard and said, hey, is somebody going to come? And the security guard said, what's your name again? And I said, Charles Davidson. From the other side of the security barrier, someone said, Dr. Davidson. And it was an older white gentleman who had been standing there the entire 20 minutes that I was waiting. He was reading something and writing and making notes, but looking up, looking around, looking past me, looking around me, never inquired who I was, but I figured this can't be the person, so I wasn't interested in him either. So he says, Dr. Davidson, I said, yes. He said, oh, I'm so-and-so, I'm here to take you to the interview. When I get on the other side of the security gate, I look down at what he was reading, and what he was reading was my CV. He was reading my resume, making notes for the interview. He was reading the paper version of me and looking at the real me and deciding that the two could never have been the same. He was so sure of it that he never inquired, are you Dr. Davidson? He was so sure. It never dawned on him to inquire if I was the person waiting, although I was standing there with my portfolio, the only person there for 20 minutes, obviously. So I say all this just to begin in this sort of my preface, just to say, as you think about postgraduate work, whether it's, you know, employment, whether it's academic work, whatever it is, I really invite you, before you even send out the resume, be sure you're clear, right, on what your real success is, right, on what your real accomplishments are. I mean, those things on the resume obviously are real accomplishments, but I want you to be clear that you're clear about the accomplishments that you've made in your life, the ones that are really going to sustain you. Because what I have found is we're not clear on those things, that paper resume will carry us to places. And if we haven't thought it through, it can be a tricky situation, right? It can be very tricky. So I guess that's my first piece of thinking that I would invite you to work on, really. And it's a real exercise that I don't think it's a waste of time at all, especially since, you know, we're home a bit more now. Take some time, take out a piece of paper, do a resume, You'll never show it to another soul, right? But write down what you've done, what you're proud of, what your accomplishments are, and focus on that. Add to that resume, because that's going to give you the ability to hold the space properly when you get into the place that your paper resume takes you. Okay, that's my first thought. Ms. Woods, did you want to say something?
Sure. I was just thinking there are a couple of questions that have come up that just wanted to ask you as you're speaking, if you would address and consider folks who are in graduate school as well. I have a couple of questions and I can read them to you and you can kind of incorporate them into what you're going to say moving forward, or we could wait till after, whatever you prefer.
We can incorporate. I think you know, while we're on it, let's grapple with it.
Okay, sure. One second. So,
and yes, everything does apply. It's employment, it's graduate school, it's professional school. It's all the same principle, right? And I just, before you give the question, Ms. Woods, I just want to say on that point, look, people, I don't know any of you, but here's what I do know. Whatever it is you're sitting there thinking you want to do, the difference between you and me is this: I'm clear you can do it. There's no part of me that doubts that. Not one. I don't need to know you. I don't have to know you. I know that if you want to do something, I don't care what it is, whether it's work, whether it's graduate school, whether it's professional school, it doesn't matter to me ultimately. That whether you can do it is not the question, right? I think we spend so much time, because we live in a culture that has so, degraded our sort of ability to aspire to things in a really holistic way, that we're always wondering, am I good enough? Can I do it? And you might not use that language, but you know the feeling. And I want to put that to bed for you before we even go any further. Obviously, you can do it. You can do whatever it is you want to do. You can do whatever it is you set your mind to do. I know you've heard it before, but I really want to underscore that for you, because I've seen it in my life and I've seen it in the life of thousands of students that I've worked with. I'm not even anybody who comes to me for advisement, they will know that Dr. Davidson doesn't spend but about 5 minutes. I'll spend 5 minutes with you. I'll get into the neuroses and the anxiety with you. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, the LSAT is hard. Oh my God, the GRE is really difficult. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm done with that. So you need to get studying and you need to accomplish this, because you will do this, right? I'm not worried about whether you can do it. What I want us to do, however, is to stop worrying about whether we can do it and figure out who we're going to be when we get where we're going, because you're going to get there, right? But the work really is to figure out not whether you can get there. That's a given. That's a given to me. The work is figuring out who you're going to be when you get it, because too often we get things and we aren't ready to hold them, right? And so I really want you to do that work, because I am not worried about whether you can do it. And all that feeling of like, oh my God, you get to that senior year, that junior, senior year, and it's all anxiety. And I know I can't make it go away, but what I can tell you is this: I already know the outcome, right? Don't worry about that. Let's figure out who you're going to be when you get where you're going. Okay, Ms. Woods, I'm ready.
All right, sure. Am I unmuted? Yes. So Christina Simmons has thanking you for coming. And she says, as a current Black PhD student here at Maryland, I continue to struggle with how to keep going and to finish. What factors propelled or inspired you to continue through all of your degrees, your master's, your PhD, and your JD? Did those factors ever change, or were they consistent throughout your academic trajectory?
That is a lovely question. And I just want to say something to you just right off the bat. That PhD thing and being in these doctoral programs, that is a special challenge, right? That is a special challenge. There were times in the middle of that where I thought, you know what, I'm not doing this. I have enough stuff behind me. I'm not going to do it. So I just want to encourage you, right? I want to encourage you, because I know how it can feel when you feel like I'm done. I can't do this. I'm not supported. I got to the point where I hated my topic. I had a room full of papers and I was like, I'm just not going to look at them, right? I went through all of those stages of like, super excitement to, oh my God, it's okay if I never finish this. But I got one piece of advice. And it's so crazy because it's the one piece of advice my advisor gave me that I actually liked. And I told him at one point, I'm losing, I'm not really interested in this. And he said to me, Charles, it's important what you're doing. And the only thing I can tell you is this, get it done. And I don't know what the words get it done did for me, but it did something for me. And I just realized I'm going to get this done. Um, you know, it's really hard with these programs, and it's true in the master's program. It's definitely true in the doctoral program. It's really hard to keep yourself motivated, right? But I will say this, you know, you find whatever it is you need to find, right? Within you, without, you know, get the support, find the people, find the practices, find the self-care, find whatever it is that's going to motivate you to finish. Because let me just be clear, we need you to finish. We need you to finish. The number of Black PhDs in this country is shocking. I was like one of 7 in my discipline the year I got my PhD. That's insane. That's insane. It's despicable, right? It's just absolutely ridiculous. Was it Christine? Christine, we need you to finish. I need you to finish. We need you out here with that PhD. So let me tell you, if that's the motivation, right? This is what I think, you know, in the moments where it gets dark, remember, this isn't even about you. I mean, and I say that in the most loving way possible. This isn't about you, because ultimately my PhD was not about me either. But it really, you know what it was? As my law degree, as your bachelor's, as your master's, as all of your degrees, this better be for the people who can't even dream of being at University of Maryland. You all know, and I know very well, right? I can go out, I live in New York City, I can go out to the corner and find 1,000 people, right? Who can't even imagine being on a Zoom call like this, who can't imagine having people, a career center to help them think about what it means to work as a Black person. This can't be for us. I mean, I don't deserve it, right? I mean, and nobody else does, right? We don't, it's not about us really. Please finish that, because you know what? You're gonna give permission to somebody else to get into a doctoral program and to finish it. And I know that's a struggle, but here's the thing. Don't worry about you. You'll be fine. Do it for the people who aren't gonna be fine, who can't even imagine, you know, meeting a Black PhD. And there are plenty of people who've never met one, right? I deal with students every day who say, oh, you're the first Black lawyer I've ever met in 2020, right? We have to be mindful, and I only say this as a word of encouragement to you. You are fine, and you can pull through this. Do it for them. Don't worry about you. You are fine. Help those people who can't even imagine this. You're doing it because they're only going to be, I don't know what field you're in, but let me be clear. There are very few of us out there in the world. Add to that number, please. I need you to finish.
Maybe to piggyback on that, Dr. Davidson, some of the tools and mechanisms that you use or that you share with your students about navigating graduate school, and that they might be some of the same tools that you would advise students as far as pursuing their professional careers in any way. But
absolutely,
that question came up about what is it like to be a Black graduate student?
Oof, yeah. So this is applicable, and I think it's important, Ms. Woods, to point out, and I think you're exactly right. This is the workplace, this is the academic environment, this is law school, this is grad school, this is wherever you are, right? I mean, if we're talking about schools, we're also talking about the professional sphere. The things that I think, I'll tell you what I did wrong. I'll tell you what I did wrong, and I hope that you all are doing this correctly. And I think you probably are. Because I can tell by the fact that you're here, you're already better off than I am, right? So I guess my first message to you is, listen, you all have nothing to worry about. You all are already doing better than anybody that I know. 30 years ago, we didn't have, nobody at Maryland was doing this. Nobody, right? This did not exist. They would have thought it was inappropriate and racist in the first place, right? It would have never existed. So you are already in a very privileged position. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think, navigating grad school, navigating the professional world, do the thing that I did not do until it was quite late. And you've heard this before, and I hate to sort of harp on the theme, but find yourself a Black mentor. and it doesn't have to be a Black mentor, right? It's ideal if it is to me, that was important for me, but find yourself a mentor. It doesn't matter who the mentor is actually. Find whoever's a person who actually takes the idea that their success, your success is their success. That's your mentor. Find the person who believes that for you, right? Find, and listen, and I say that, and we say that rather easily and rather glibly. It's not easy to find a good mentor, right? It's not easy to find a good mentor. I will say that, and I just realized that I had a wonderful professor at University of Maryland named Dr. Black, actually. He was a French professor, Cordell Black, who actually transformed my thinking about, about Blackness, about thinking about it, about reading about it. I was a French literature major there. And so he really was transformative. Find some, and to this day, I think about what he taught me and what I learned from him. Find somebody to help you. The other thing is, when you go to these spaces, find the people, Black people, whoever, find the community that's gonna help you get through this. Graduate schools, I think it's quite easy because, they're probably groups, they're probably organizations who can help you. In the workplace, it can be a little bit more challenging because it just depends on who you're working with and where you're working. I would still encourage you, whether you find the people in your workplace or you have to go outside of your workplace, find some people to support you. The challenge that we have, I think very often, is we get in environments and we feel like I have to do this on my own, because it's been so true, right? It's been so true. But I invite you to sort of up in that notion that you have to do it on your own, because it will just be really hard. I will tell you that when I was a young lawyer, I graduated from law school and I got into the honors program at the Justice Department. And I was somebody who was really committed to sort of social justice work. And I was definitely going into public service. And I was really excited because I got into this honors program, which is the only way to get into the Justice Department directly out of law school. And I got into this honors program, and, I got there, and of course, I was the only Black person in the honors program in the nation that year. So I was like on the cover of the honors program book, and my picture was everywhere, which should have been the first sign to me this might be a problematic environment for me, right? That the Justice Department had only hired one Black man in 1992 should have been problematic to me. And it later became problematic. But I will say that when I got to the Justice Department, I found a mentor who helped me and who worked with me and who really helped me work through some really difficult situations there. And there are a couple situations that I will always come to mind that I can share with you later, but I do think it's really crucial that you do that. And I think the third thing I would say is this: go back to my first point. Be clear before you set foot into any environment. Be clear about who you are, what your gifts are, what you're bringing, what your accomplishments are. And I'm not talking about the paper resume, right? One of the things I always say to Black students is this: you have to remember, right? Because you'll go into these environments where, they can be these predominantly white environments, and you can go into these environments. And I want you to remember something, because often we'll sit at the table and, and I've had this experience many times. You'll sit at the table and you'll hear these people speaking with such confidence and such confidence, right? And I can't figure out what it's rooted in, right? I mean, some of them went to great schools and had great backgrounds. Some of them, are just like regular people, but they were super confident, right? And it made me feel like, well, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't say anything. These people seem like they know what they're talking about. They didn't. That's the first thing. They did not know what they were talking about. They had a confidence that I did not have, because I had experiences, as many Black people do, that don't instill in us the confidence to go into these spaces and then feel like our voice matters. And if you're a Black woman, that's doubly true, right? You have to deal with being Black and then being a woman and having men of all races, right, sort of trample over and sort of dismiss your voice, right? It's doubly, if you're a person from the LGBTQ community, doubly important, right? These things are always happening. But what changed for me was this: I realized these people have had experiences that I may not have had. That is obviously true. I mean, that's obviously true. But then what I realized about myself, and I realized this about every one of you, and this is something that I don't know if you've ever read Bell Hooks, but if you haven't, I would invite you to get onto Bell Hooks, because she's a brilliant Black intellectual, brilliant, very accessible. Get into Bell. But one of the things that Bell Hook and Kimberly Crenshaw and other intellectuals, there's this line, and it deeply resonates with me. And it says, your experience is your expertise. Your experience is your expertise. And I mean that, and in the way that, just as it sounds, whatever your background is, wherever you came from, I don't care where it is, I don't care what the background is, I don't care what you lived through, I don't care what, I mean, I do care. I mean, what I'm saying is it's not relevant in the sense that, you know, wherever you've come from and whatever you've been through, I want you to understand that's not just experience. And I'm talking about the terrible things that have happened too, your successes, but also the terrible things that have happened. You know, people say, Dr. Davidson, you don't know my household. You don't know the zip code I grew up in. You don't know the neighborhood I grew up in. You don't know what's in my bank account. And I'm like, I do not know this. I do not know those things. You're exactly right. But what I do know is this, that experience that you've had is your expertise. And we're always looking for the expertise to come from somebody to give you a degree and to give you some piece of paper. How about the fact that what you've lived through, what you bring to the table is expertise? And the thing about expertise is, in America, we treat expertise in a certain way. We compensate it, we treat it with respect, right? And we listen to it. And I really want to say that to you, because when you get to these tables, the tendency can be, I'm going to be quiet, because they're talking so authoritatively. Here's what they can't do. They can never have the experience that you've had. That's expertise, and it needs to be treated that way. And I need you to treat it that way, right? Because when you treat it that way, right, people will see that. People will see it as well. Got another question for me?
Yes, I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Could you talk a little bit about, you alluded to it before, but the imposter syndrome, and how do you deal with it?
If I had an answer for that, right, I would have written the book, and we wouldn't be having this conversation, or I'd be having this conversation from a much bigger apartment. It's real, right? I mean, it's real. But what I have learned over the course of my life is that, listen, everybody has it, right? Everybody has it. And I'm talking about the people who appear the most confident, right? I'm talking about the people who appear the most confident are the people who very, very often, I have learned this very, very well, suffer deeply from this sense of imposter syndrome, right? One of the things that has worked for me really has been to recognize, you know, we're always measuring ourselves in relationship to others, but it's a false equivalency, right? You're measuring your inside and everything you know about you to what somebody else presents. You're always going to lose in that equation, right? You're always going to feel like an imposter. You're always going to feel like I'm here and I don't belong. You don't know anybody well enough to know whether you're doing better or worse than they are. You don't know that. You don't know anybody well enough to know that. And I always try to bring myself back to that fact when I find myself in this idea of like, what am I doing here? I really don't know. Listen, I had talking to Christina about with the PhD. You know, I had my PhD. I went in front of a class of students. Clearly, I know what I'm talking about. And I got up there my first day, and I'm like, oh my God, these students are going to see that I really didn't read that book, or I don't know these things, or I don't know these things, right? And I was wrong, right? Part of it is really recognizing that, and you have to do the work. I mean, it's a daily exercise when you go in to remember you do know what you know. Your experience is your expertise. To understand that everybody believes that they're imposters, right? Those people, when you look at those people and you feel intimidated, I want you to remember they're faking it. they're faking it. They're faking it. Invariably, they're faking it. And I have really worked with some very senior people in law, in government, in academia. They're faking it. And I say that only in a way to say to you, when you get caught in the grip of it, and it's a real grip, come back to like home base, right? Come back to your touchstone. And remember, you do know what you know. You are where you are because you deserve to be where you are. Wherever your feet are is where you belong in that moment. Doesn't mean you have to stay, right? And doesn't mean it's the right place for you forever. But wherever your feet are, you actually belong, right? So I don't care what place it is. I don't care what law firm or business or job or school. You know, it's funny because, you know, I was in the master's program at Harvard, and you know, I went in, and it was really interesting because, you know, you're thinking, oh my gosh, everybody's really smart. And what am I doing here with all of these smart people? It took me about 4 weeks, and I realized this is not true. It's funny because I always would say to people, the smartest people I actually met were at University of Maryland. I would always tell people that the smartest people I met were at University of Maryland. I would say that at Harvard all the time. I was like, oh, these people are really, I mean, there were some bright people, obviously bright people. But the point of the matter, but the fact of the matter is that, you know what? Everybody there is, everybody's bright. You're bright. You're as bright as anybody else, right? And so you know, you start to inhabit that, but you have to do the work, because imposter syndrome, it's embedded, right, in all of us. And again, it's embedded in Black people. And if you have any other intersecting identity that has been marginalized in society, it's hard, but you can do that work, right? And it is work to really remind yourself, here's what's true. You know, and just last point on this, because I think it's really important to say this. We have to acknowledge something, Black people, and this is really important. Our feelings, what we feel about a situation, right? You walk into a situation, you feel like I'm an imposter, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. That feeling is very, very real. And we have to acknowledge that our feelings are real. But we also have to do another level of inquiry and remember that our feelings are real, they just aren't true. Right? A feeling can be real without being true, and very often they aren't. Don't deny that you're feeling what you're feeling. Don't deny that, because that's psychologically and spiritually unsound. Acknowledge that you're feeling, I'm feeling intimidated, I'm feeling not good enough, I'm feeling unworthy. Acknowledge it. That feels real. Is it true? The answer is no. If you have to be an inquiry about it, I can tell you the answer is no. The answer is no. Your feelings are real, they just aren't always true.
So we have a couple of questions, key questions from different topic areas. Let me get to this one first. Let me also say it came from Denise Johnson. And she says, first of all, I have to say I really needed this. I'm a dietetics student. I never thought I would face the racial challenges and discomfort as I have since I transferred. As I decide to go further into the field, I see that it's not getting any easier. I'm truly considered a minority, so much so to the point that everyone knows and accepts the field as whitewashed. As someone who has little experience overcoming these things, how can I continue without losing my temper, having an attitude, and adding to that Black stereotype?
Ooh, what was the name? Denise? Was that Denise?
Yeah,
Thank you, Denise.
yeah.
That's really important. And it's so interesting because it's a thing for Black women in particular, right? I mean, like, you're always having to modulate yourself, right, so that you don't come off as angry or as aggressive or as as threatening, right?
Kamala.
You saw that. You saw Senator Harris on that stage with this man who was in no way her equal professionally, right? In no way her professional equal. You saw the delicate balance she had to walk, and Denise, that's a real thing. I mean, I do so appreciate that question. The thing is, I'm going to say something that I probably wouldn't have said before, but I'll say this. Let's just be clear that there is a place for appropriate anger. There is a place to be appropriately and vocally displeased. I mean, this whole thing about perpetuating stereotypes, the thing about that is, you have to remember, right? And I think this is the thing about Black respectability, because this has been a dangerous thing, right? We're always thinking about, when we go in these spaces, how do I act so that they don't think I'm just like the other Black people? How do I act so they don't get offended? How do I act so they're comfortable? How do I act so people aren't upset with me? How do I modulate? How do I dress? What do I do with my hair? What do I do with my tone, right? The thing about it is, you have to be careful, because the truth of the matter is, you can do all of that. It's not changing how anybody thinks necessarily, right? I mean, I always tell my students, look, Black respectability is a thing, right? We want it to be these respectable people in the eyes of white people. Much good that did us. I mean, Martin Luther King got killed in a suit, a shirt and tie. And so I believe did Malcolm X. I mean, we think it's the clothes, we think it's the hair, we think it's the tone. I mean, yeah, obviously you want to be professional. Obviously you want to, but that's not about not giving into Black stereotypes. That's because that's who you are, right? I don't think that it's, we can just blanketly say there's no place for anger in the workplace. Some things happened to me that I was angry about, and you know what? That's what transformed the situation. Anger can transform the situation, appropriately done, right? You just want to make sure that you're doing it appropriately. At the same time, Denise, you got to figure it out the way, because you're in a field, you aren't going to find a whole lot more of you. I mean, it's not like it's not like the group is out there and you just don't know where they are, right? I mean, they may be out there, but I mean, it's probably not a field that's super diverse. I would invite you to really try to find, as I said, try to find the mentor, try to find the people, because one of the things that we do is we let this stuff build up. And the problem is that you're the one that pays the cost, right? You pay the price. I let so much stuff go in the workplace, especially when I was at the Justice Department. I did exactly what you're talking about. I was the consummate professional. I came in every day. I looked great. I was formal. I was a really super respectable person. I was sure I was going to be an assistant attorney general. I was definitely on that path. I was doing everything right. I was in the honors program. I was moving up. Everything was great. And then one day I get a knock on the door, and it's my boss, a young white guy who's only like a few years older than me. And he said, Charles, our boss, the boss of the both of us, he said, our boss, whose name was Wally, he said, Wally wants you to drive a group of them to a meeting. And I said, drive them to a meeting, like in my car? Because I didn't understand what he was asking of me. And he said, I don't know. They just want you to drive them to a meeting at Main Justice. I said, well, why would I drive them to a meeting? He says, I don't know, but they want you to drive them. And I said, but they're interns. There's a motor pool. There are other people who can drive them to a meeting, which was only 4 blocks away on Pennsylvania Avenue at Main Justice. He said, I can't tell you. I don't know. I'm just delivering a message. They want you to drive. Mind you, they were going to a meeting about a project that I had done all the work on, okay? And I wasn't invited, and I said, am I to attend the meeting? And they said, no, you're not going to the meeting. They just need you to drive. Right? They need you to drive. And, it's funny because I just didn't know, I can't even explain what I felt. Right? I mean, I can't explain what I felt, because on the one hand, let me be honest, there was a part of me that said, oh my gosh, you can't say no to these people because you're moving up the ladder. And there's another part of me that said things that I can't repeat in public, right? There's another part of me that, I can't tell you what I was saying. And it's funny because I picked up the phone and I called my sister, and she said, just quit. And I said, I can't quit. I'm going to be an assistant attorney general. I can't leave this place. She's like, well, you need to walk out. And so I hung up the phone. And a friend came in, and I told her, a Latino woman, friend of mine came in, and she said, what are they asking you to do? And I said, they're asking me to drive them to a meeting. And she's like, well, I'm going to ride with you. I said, well, you can't ride with me. I can't take a friend along. And she's like, no, you are not going to do this by yourself. I was like, we can't both get fired. So, let's just, I just don't do anything. I just decide I'm not going to do anything, and I do nothing. And I sit at my desk and I go back to work on the brief I was working on. And like 20 minutes later, they come and knock at the door again. And he said, Charles, what are you doing? I said, I'm working. You need to get ready because they're getting ready to go. I said, I don't know what, I don't understand this request. Why are they asking me to drive them? He said, I don't know, but you need to get ready. And so I ignore him again, and I'm sitting there, but my insides are just, I'm sick. I feel I'm literally nauseous. And you know, he comes back 10 minutes later, and he's like, look, you gotta go. And I sat there, and I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm on the verge of tears. I'm about to cry. I don't know what to do. I'm 25. I think I was 24 or 25. I was quite young. And, you know, I got up and he said, you know, go get the keys from the motor pool. And I stood there with my friend, the Latino woman, and she said, Charles, you know, just do it and just do it. And just, you know, what do you know, I mean, they're forcing you. So I go downstairs, we go downstairs together, and I go to the motor pool and I ask for a key to a car. And the black guy, the drivers who ought to be driving, right? He said, why are you asking for keys for a car? And I look at this black guy, and he looks at my eyes, and I look at his eyes, and I know I can't say anything because if I do, I'm just gonna start sobbing. And he looks at me and he grabs my hand. And he says, I know why they asked you. And he's holding my hand, like this older man is holding my hand. And he said, I know why they asked you. And he said, brother, just do it and forget about these people. He said, you know who you are, right? And so I drove them. I got out in the car. They came out. They didn't speak to me. I was completely a driver. But I will say that when I did get in that car, the first thing I did was check for an airbag because I had decided, the dark part of me had decided I was going to crash the car and kill us all, right? The dark part of me was going to run into a lamppost on Pennsylvania Avenue. So I made sure I had the airbag on my side because I wasn't going to die. But I drove them to the meeting. And when I drive into the Justice Department, my boss gets out and he taps the top of the car and he said, have it washed and filled up when you come back.
Oh, no.
Right. And I tell the story only to say this, and I'm coming back, Denise, this is to say this. Nothing will protect you, right? You aren't, you know, all of your stuff, right? All of our respectability doesn't protect you, right? It's not a message to say, you know, it's to say, be who you are because you are a professional, you are a person who is out there doing what she's doing, accomplishing things and achieving, and that's who you are. That kind of situation is a situation where anger is appropriate. It's appropriate to be angry in that situation, right? When something is touching on your integrity, I think it's okay for you to be angry. And you know what? Anybody who thinks there's a Black stereotype, you aren't going to convince them otherwise. If they believe that that's who Black people are, there's nothing you can do that's going to change them in that view. So you can probably let that go and behave in the way that is simply in integrity with who you are. And if that integrity requires you to be angry or forceful or clear, as long as it's not coming from the place, you know, make sure that's coming from the right place. But as long as if you're acting in integrity, your next best step will be obvious to you, right? But I want to be clear, if people think that there's this Black stereotype, the suit, the work, the grades, the degree won't change anything about it. I was in the honors program and they asked me to drive them to a meeting. Now, I did threaten to sue the Justice Department after that, and I got a lot out of it, right? I came back a few days later when I wasn't angry, and I challenged them on this, and they gave me what I wanted, but I got a big raise and I got to move to Miami. So just to say that the appropriate, you know, response was my anger, right? And it teaches you that, like, you can armor yourself and suit up every day for this, but nothing protects you from this mentality. So just to say, where it's appropriate, if it's in integrity with you, do what you know is the right thing to do. Don't worry about the stereotypes.
So we have
that's in their mind.
We have some mounting questions and interest and compliments and so on.
I'm gonna go
we do it. And we do have we've got 5 minutes left, and I had asked Dr. Davidson if he'd be willing to stay on just a few minutes beyond time. So if you all want to continue, I will certainly be here, and he's willing to be here as well. Next question is, so many Black students are misdiagnosed, undiagnosed in the K through 12 system and don't get treatment and services that they need. Then they make it to university, and those who make it to university may continue to be untreated or not get needed services. Or stigma may keep them from seeking treatment. One big problem we face is that there's so little data on race and disability on campus. What has your experience been that might enlighten us and help us serve Black students? That's one of my staff, one of my fellow staff members.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as Ms. Wood said, I'm at the City University of New York. We're the public University of New York City. So as you can imagine, our students come from lots of different backgrounds, but most of our students are products of the New York City public school system, which like any, the largest school system in the country, like any school system, has a very, very checkered record, right, in supporting students with disability, students with color with disability, and just supporting students of color, period. There is such a tendency, I mean, so I think about it just as probably you think about it. At the university, there's so much of a challenge that we have with people really wanting to ascribe things to students that, as you said, are things that have been misdiagnosed, that are undiagnosed. And a lot of faculty members are just oblivious to this, or don't recognize sort of the product of misdiagnosis. They don't understand educational trauma, right? They don't understand that our students come into the room having gone through very difficult experiences, and that those experiences, those traumatic experiences, are not recognized, are not understood, and are routinely ignored. So, and it's a challenge, right? I mean, I agree, there's so little data on this, and people aren't treating this in the way that they should, because I think partly, at least from my experience, is that a lot of this stuff is simply sort of swept under the rug and ascribed to low-performing Black students, right? I mean, I deal with this I'm in a constant struggle with the Law School Admission Council, because I will say that my program, we're the #4 producer of Black applicants to law school in the nation, right? I have really worked on this, and we're the #4 producer in the nation of Black applicants to law school. And the Law School Admissions Council always wants to talk to me about how fair the LSAT is, and how fair these standardized tests are, and how they are completely biased, and how they're completely unbiased, and how students, they're statistically proven to be predictive of success. And, I come back to them all the time and I say, but you don't take account of who the students are who are taking the test. You don't understand where they got, what it means for them to get, how they got to the room to take the test. You don't know that, you don't understand that journey. We aren't all starting at the same place. And for you to tell me that is insulting and reductive and ridiculous, right? We, I think, as Black people, certainly as Black educators, we have to be on top of people, right, all the time, because it's so easy in this culture and in this educational narrative of Black underperformance to just ascribe the stuff that are actually, there's overdiagnosis and there's underdiagnosis and there's misdiagnosis, as you correctly said. I mean, we need to attend to that, right? And we have to watch all of the instances in which it happens. We had a situation just very recently where, there's just an inattentiveness to these students, right? Because I think there's just this idea that, well, you made it to college, you're here, so you're like everybody else. You're on the same playing field and I can treat you the same. Well, I mean, equality, not equity, or equality, not equity, right? Obviously, it's an enormous challenge. I don't have any great insight on that, except for to tell you that I struggle with it all the time. I fight the fight with the Law School Admissions Council. I fight the fight with faculty members. I was in a struggle just recently where, you know, students were being penalized for not turning their cameras on. And, you know, I was in this meeting and then people were like, well, we can't tell if they're participating and we don't know what they're doing and we don't know if they're engaged. I'm like, you don't know if they're engaged when they're sitting in front of you. 99% of the time I've seen you teach, I know they're not engaged. I can be sure that your students aren't engaged. You don't know that. And I said, you can't force a student to show his or her background. You can't force them to show their home. You can't, it is absolutely one of these ways in which we sort of want to erase this idea that our students are really all coming from very different places. I think there's just this erasure around that. And it's a fight you just have to fight. I feel that one has to fight on every front. I mean, just every time you confront it, because it is true, there's not data, but you know what's happening, right? And so I sort of speak out even in the absence of data, which is just opinion, but I'm pretty clear I'm right about that.
Thank you. We had a question about, that's okay, I'm gonna actually answer that one directly. Let's see, I've got comments that say this is super helpful. It is being recorded, so this will be available for you all to see toward the end of the week, as well as the other four workshops that we've done in this series. Let's see, someone has mentioned, Christina Sessoms mentioned a book Charles called, Dr. Davidson called the book Eloquent Rage by Dr. Brittany Cooper.
Amazing, an amazing
about the idea of Black women's anger.
Amazing book, yeah,
okay.
Amazing. I mean, you know, look, you know, I really feel like we've given anger a bad rap, right? I mean, anger is just another emotion that wants its seat at the table, right? It's not better or worse than anything else. We've pathologized it in lots of ways. And again, in our bid to sort of merge into this sort of mainstream world, it's like, you know, people are always afraid of Black rage and Black people seeming angry. Well, I mean, you should be. I mean, because I mean, I will be the first to admit I'm a terribly angry person. I was invited to a panel not so long ago, and they asked me, you know, what, Dr. Davis, you always seem so whatever. How do you manage your anger? I said, I don't manage it. I mean, I probably need therapy about it. I have a lot of anger about what happens, what's happened to me, what happens in the world, what's happening to you, and we need our anger. Right? We need our anger. Don't let anybody tell you that your anger is the problem. You need that anger. You need to make sure that that anger is the fuel, right? Don't let that anger be the defining thing of you. Let that anger be the fuel that propels you and motivates you. And again, I say that in a way that's sort of, you know, I want to be careful because people tell you, oh, channel your anger in the right way. Channel your anger in the right way. Well, yeah, channel your anger in the right way. That's great. That's good news. Do that. But also be clear that, you know, find outlets for your anger that may not look okay to other people. I mean, if you have to go scream in your room, go do it. I mean, whatever your way of dealing it, deal with it. But it's not a pathology, right? The fascinating thing is that Black people aren't more angry, aren't more visibly angry, aren't more expressively angry. That's what actually is the miracle, I think, of America, of sort of Black Americans, is that we aren't as angry as we could be.
Well, again, more positive comments about, including a good bit of feedback about how people felt about you being asked to drive. So it's still tender, even though it's been a while. That was like you know, that.
But do I have time just to make one more point on that? Because I do think that there's a piece of the story I always forget. So, you know, it's funny because for years I couldn't tell that story to people because I was just so embarrassed that I'd actually done it. I was so ashamed that I had actually done it that I would never tell people, oh, I did that, right? And then I had to befriend and sort of and sort of find compassion for that person who was young and who thought that what mattered the most in the world was this career success, the paper resume. I thought that mattered. I thought that's what was going to define me. I thought that was what was going to sort of, be my ticket to success in the way that the world had defined it. I was sure of it, right? And so what happened was it caused me to act out of integrity with who I was. But the interesting thing is that let's say 30 years go by, and this happened just last year. So the president of my college is a Black woman who had been in the Obama administration, and she calls me one day. And she says, and she came from the Justice Department herself. So Obama had appointed her as Assistant Attorney General in the Justice Department. And she calls me one day and she's in the back of the car and she says, I'm sitting here with somebody named Ken and he knows you. And he's just talking so glowingly about it. I was like, I don't know who Ken is. He said, oh no, you know Ken. Ken used to be your intern at the Justice Department. I'm like, little Ken? He's like, yes, he's the head of, something at the Justice Department. He has some high up position at the Justice Department. And I said, oh my God, I do remember him. He was my intern. Tell him I said hello, hilarious, flashback to the Justice Department. A few weeks later, I see her again and she tells me, she said, Ken told me something that happened to you at the Justice Department. Ken told me they asked you to drive this car. They asked you to drive into the meeting. And Ken, my intern, who I never saw again, right? I haven't seen him in 30 something years. Ken was my intern at that time and he saw it. And he said, and he told her this last year, he told her, I saw how he handled that and I saw what they did to him. And that was what the inspiration for me, that's what kept me at Justice. And that's why I decided I had to get involved. And he became sort of the head of, it was the office that handled sort of like equal employment, LGBTQ issues. He handled all of the issues around diversity, around racial and other forms of discrimination at the Justice Department. And what he credited that with was witnessing what happened when I had what I call my driving Miss Daisy moment, right? He saw that, and actually that changed his career trajectory. Right. So I tell the story in a funny way now because I have it's sort of the loop got closed, right? That like things will happen to you in the workplace and absolutely things will happen and you will have experiences. But I always want you to remember that there's always more going on than you see, right? And to always be sure, because the best bet you have, because you'll never know how a thing is going to play out, the best bet you have is to act in integrity with who you are. Coming back to point one, that's why I say do your own personal CV so you know who you are. When you act in integrity with yourself, listen, when somebody asks you to drive them someplace, when you're clear, you'll say, actually, that's not interesting to me. It's not an interesting input. Thank you for asking me, but I'm actually not interested in it. Now, obviously, there's a certain privilege that if you can do that. I mean, not everybody can do that, you'll be in greater inquiry than I was, right? I was in just a state of upset, but ultimately, had I really been very clear about who I was, about the real me versus the paper me, there would have been a different experience altogether, right? And so I just want to underscore that, like, there's no getting around it. There's no advice I can give you. There's no advice anybody can give you about how to handle every situation. But I can tell you this, figure out who you are. That's one. That's the key thing. Who you are, what matters to you. We think, oh yeah, I know these things. I know what matters to me. They're running around in your head. That's not going to help you in a situation when you're confronted with something like that. You better be really, really solid on that, right? You got to be really solid on that. Figure out who you are. But also remember this, figure out before you go into any of these places, grad school, law school, the workplace, wherever you go, figure out who you're going into it for, right? The thing for me is that, I tried being a lawyer. It was fine. I found out I didn't love law. I love teaching law. I'm a great law professor. I love teaching law. Super happy with that. I'm a great advisor to students of color. I'm really, that's the thing that I do. The funny thing is that I found success, right? Because I stopped worrying about me and my career. Right. Obviously, I care about my career and I manage it very closely and I think about it a lot. And I do all the needful things, but I stopped making me the priority. Right. And I figured out, wait a minute, the question is not me, who am I here to serve? And I can't say it enough, people. Black people, we have to help each other. The truth of the matter, you are your sister's keeper. You really are, because your fate is my fate. And when you win, I win. But when you lose, I lose, right? If we don't help each other, and I mean, and I, it makes me feel emotional because I love the election results, right? I do love these election results, but I want to underscore nothing has changed, right?
Mhm.
70 million people voted for Donald Trump. And this is not a political conversation, but they voted for a lot of isms like racism and misogyny and xenophobia. A lot of things that, I don't subscribe to, right? But just to say that that's out there, right? And that's affecting people who, by the way, again, I come back, who aren't at University of Maryland on a call like this tonight. And I think we have to be mindful that we're the people who takes care of them. Because, one of the things I think has been most dangerous to Black people is we've become afraid of other Black people. We've become afraid to say I'm explicitly for Black people. We've become afraid to help other Black people. We've let notions of class and listen, the truth of the matter is, I don't care if you grew up in inner city Baltimore or Bel Air, California, right? The truth of the matter is that your experience is going to be much more alike, right, than different in lots of ways. Obviously, there's different access, but the truth of the matter, you're going to score the same on the LSAT. Your standardized test scores aren't going to be that different, right? Your employment opportunities aren't going to be terribly different. There's a famous study that I always want everybody to read by Raj Chetty. Have you read the Chetty study? Fascinating study, but it showed that Black men who are born to parents who are millionaires are far more likely to fall in class status than to stay where they are. Right? So if your parents are millionaires, you're more than likely than not, you will end up as a middle class person or a lower middle class person. You're likely to fall 2 income quintiles. You're much more likely to go fall than you are to stay a millionaire. Right? Also, I think it's interesting, and this is just to point out why our fates are so linked. Don't let the class thing fool you. A Black man born to parents who are millionaires is as likely to be incarcerated as the white man whose parents make $36,000, just to be clear. So don't get confused, right? Don't get confused. We're all in the same boat, all of us. We all are in the same boat. Help every Black person you can. And I mean this because what we do is we hang out in this moral neutral ground, this neutral lane, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I love my people, but what are you doing? But what are you doing? Like, what do you, and I don't, I have no specific guidance for you as to what that looks like in your life. But what I do think is this, we have to be as aggressive about taking care of each other as other people are as aggressive about undermining us, right? Undermining our opportunities, right? We have to be that aggressive, right? You all know, you all know the phenomenon, right? That Black name, the resumes with Black names get thrown out, twice. They're twice as likely not to be read as if they think it's the white name with the exact same resume. There was a thing done here at NYU with a guy, Thomas Meyer. They made the law firms believe that Thomas Meyer was Black. 30 of them they made believe he was Black. 30 of them they made the partners believe Thomas Meyer was white. Both, resumes had him from NYU Law School, all of this accomplishments. Exact same writing sample. You know what happened, right? The people who thought Thomas Meyer was Black, they found mistakes. They found grammatical mistakes in his writing sample that were in the white writing sample, in the same writing sample. When they believed he was white, they didn't even find him. They scrutinized his legal analysis. They found weaknesses in the writing. They found weaknesses in the thinking. They thought, someone wrote, how did this person get into NYU? Wow. Right? You get what's out there, right? And so I just say this to you, get out of the neutral zone, right? Get out of the neutral lane, right? Get out of neutrality and act intentionally and purposefully to support every Black person you can. Because the truth of the matter is, and I will end on this, there's a teaching that says, we often view the journey in life as, we're ascending a mountain, we're climbing up the mountain, you get your degree, you get the job, you move up, you keep moving up. But if the vision of our lives is that we're ascending this mountain, what about the people who aren't coming up with us? You're going to make it to the top, and you're going to have left the people in poverty. You're going to have left the disabled. You're going to have left you're going to have left your alcoholic uncle. You're going to have left the kids who can't. You're going to have left a whole bunch of people behind, and you're going to make it to the top of the mountain, and they're going to still be at the bottom. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a lonely mountaintop. Think about this. What if the mountain went down? What if it was inverted? And what if our journey, every success we took, every success we make, every success we get, every accomplishment you make takes you closer and closer to the people who need your help? The people who need you with that new accomplishment, instead of taking you away from them, let every accomplishment take you closer to the Black people who absolutely, absolutely, absolutely need your help. Every one of you, with whatever you have and whatever you don't have, you are particularly poised, and I'm talking to you Maryland people really seriously. Each one of you, you are particularly poised to help someone just as you are. Don't wait to get the degree. Don't wait for the PhD. Don't wait for the law degree. Help them now, because then when you get those other things, you'll just be so used to it. It'll just be your way of life. When you think about these things in this way, you can go out in the world and you won't just have an impact, right? You will actually then be transformative. And that is exactly what we need. We need a transformation, right? So Black people, go out and do the needful thing. Take care of each other, help each other, be aggressive about it, right? Because that's what's going to shift us. Nobody's going to save us but us. And that's what I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave on that note.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson. I think I am 100% certain, because I feel it and I see it. You have resounding applause. There are all these little, you can see in people's feedback. I haven't figured out how to do that myself yet. So maybe you're not even getting all the ones that are there. That says, and there were other comments. I'll share those with you later. Thank you very, very much. We're going to ask anyone who might have joined late to please go ahead and look in the chat room to see where you can swipe in to let us know. Basically, you're registering to let us know that you attended, especially if there's any feedback or follow-up. That way, we'll know who was on the meeting. I'm inspired. It's unbelievable to me that, to have known you for so long and to just now get to hear some of the things that you have just put together and crystallized in the way that you share that, and your heart is in it and your soul is in it. And I love seeing that. And I am so happy and so thankful and so grateful that you have come and spent time with Terps, with Black Terps, and Terps of color. And I'm sure that we're going to look for opportunities to invite you back. So that's something we would love for you to get used to and expect.
Bring me back. I will always say yes to. I will always say yes to Maryland. I will always say yes to Maryland. I'm always happy to come back. You can since I'm home all the time, it's easy. Whenever you need. And I do want to just reiterate that if anybody wants to contact me, or if you have questions, or if you want to communicate with me, I can put my email in the chat. Is that fair? Lydia?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you can contact me if you have any thoughts or questions. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thank you so very much.
And thanks for staying and listening to me.
By the way, I have two staff friends who are on the meeting who know Dr. Black, and so they're commenting that he
I would love. I would love to. I don't even know how to contact Dr. Black. So if anybody does, please let me know, because he was such a meaningful intellectual and personal influence in my life, and I would love to let him know that, because he was a transformative person in my life. So, and in lots of ways, I became the professor I am because of Dr. Black. So that would be great.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad that that came up. Okay, folks. So yeah, any feedback, questions, or anything you have, you've got Dr. Davidson's information. You've got my information from the when you receive the link to the meeting. Any follow-up questions you have, please let us know. If you think that next semester there are topics that you would really love to have us cover, we're looking at what our plans are going to be, and it will help a lot if we know that you know that this was helpful and that you're looking for other guidance, opportunities, support, advice, inspiration. Everybody, good night. Thanks for staying on for extra time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and please do take a look at the screen right now where you can see additional events. If you did not, if you weren't, in case you didn't know, please go to, yeah, I'm having a blank. Go to careers.umd.edu, check out the events calendar, and you can see other events that we have in support of your career search or learning more about what you think you might want to do after graduation or for internships. Okay. Cheers, everyone. Thank you very much for coming on. And Dr. Davidson, I will follow up with you separately. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Bye, everyone.